Hello and welcome to Jordan Recommends. For today's episode, we're going back to the late 90s. In the late 90s, there was a trend that started to emerge. Shows that weren't about going on grand adventures or fighting evil, but rather about kids and teenagers going about their daily lives. Shows like Recess, or Hey Arnold, or Doug. And one of the shows to come out of this time period was Pepper Ann, a show about a 12-year-old girl and her friends and the many crazy situations she gets herself into. The show ran from 1997 to 2000 and aired on Disney's One Saturday Morning block. It aired side by side with Recess, a show that had a very similar concept. While Recess is usually regarded as one of the greatest animated series to come out of the late 90s, or even of all time, Pepper Ann usually gets forgotten about. And now to talk about the characters. Since Pepper Ann has quite a large cast, I'm not going to be talking about everybody. I'll just be talking about characters that show up the most. And now time to start the character roll call. First up, we have Pepper Ann herself. She's a red-headed girl who, while not being an outcast per se, she generally strives to be with the cool kids. And a lot of the episodes revolve around her trying to become cool. Pepper Ann is different from a lot of characters because she lives with her single mom and tomboyish sister and has a Jewish background. And isn't the typical attractive character that you usually would expect to be the protagonist. Next up, we have her best female friend, Nikki. She's the shy one and is highly intelligent and enjoys things like poetry and playing the piano and stuff like that. And is usually the voice of reason to Pepper Ann. She can lose her temper and get angry when Pepper Ann constantly ignores her advice, or when Pepper Ann involves her in stuff she doesn't want to be part of. And then there's Milo, who is the eccentric artist, and is always trying to share his art with the world, even though most people think it's pretty bad. And he is Pepper Ann's best male friend. And then now we come to Lydia, who's Pepper Ann's mother, and kind of falls into the typical mother character that these type of kid/teen driven shows, the mid 90s to early 2000s. A mother who's caring but is constantly, even though unintentionally, embarrassing Pepper Ann. And then we come to Moose, who's Pepper Ann's younger sister, and is extremely tomboyish and doesn't really care for girl-related stuff like fashion and boys and that type of stuff. She's more into skateboarding and playing video games than watching cartoons. And she has a very laid-back personality. And some of the other characters would be Aunt Jeannie, who was formerly a member of the Peace Corps and she's an environmentalist. And then her husband, who's a security guard. And then there's some of the people from her school, like the principal, who is constantly keeping an eye on Pepper Ann because he thinks that she's a troublemaker. And some of her classmates, like Dieter, the German boy, and Alice Kane, who's her rival and always tries to beat her in everything. And then there's Craig Bean, who's the most popular boy in school and the guy that Pepper Ann and most of the girls in school have a huge crush on. And twins Tessa and Vanessa. Even though the plots of this show are your typical plots which you'd find in shows like this, they're able to take a familiar idea and make it seem fresh and new and make it pretty funny. Like the episode when Pepper Ann runs for class president, or the episode when one of her friends that she knew back in the day comes to town to visit, and she finds out she has nothing in common with her now. And even though you've probably heard this moral like 50 times from other shows, they're able to do it in a way where it doesn't feel forced or monotonous. The show is well animated. The character designs were inventive without looking weird, ugly. Has an awesome intro that once you hear it, you'll be humming it all day, like most shows made by Disney, and has solid voice acting and writing. Anyone who's familiar with Disney's previous efforts, specifically from the Disney Afternoon era, will recognize a lot of the voices. And there's also some pretty clever sight gags and some references to previous Disney shows, as well as a clever twist having Pepper Ann's conscience be a reflection in the mirror or any surface, or any like reflection like the mirror or water or shiny surfaces and stuff like that, which usually warns her or gives her advice depending on the situation. Pepper Ann usually ignores it, just like how she usually ignores or twists Nikki's advice. This is a solid show and deserves to be remembered. And now that Disney's starting to release some of their one Saturday morning shows on DVD, maybe it'll get a DVD release soon, hopefully. If The Weekenders, which has a very similar premise, if that show can get a full release, even if it is the Disney Movie Club, then Pepper Ann deserves one too. Well, that's it for now. Till next time, see ya.